Let me start with this. If your business feels harder than it should be, even though you're doing all the right things, this episode is for you. If you are working long hours, juggling clients, managing the details, and it still feels like you're one decision away from everything falling apart, I want you to stay with me. Because what you're experiencing is not a motivation problem, it's not a discipline problem, and it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because your business is out of order. And today I want to explain what that means.
You're listening to the Off Balance Podcast, where faith, family, and business collide. Hosted by Brooks Deming, Doctor of Business Administration, business coach, and resilience expert. Each episode features real-life conversations to help entrepreneurs like you build resilience and lead with confidence.
Welcome back to Off Balance. I'm your host, Dr. Brooks. This podcast is for entrepreneurs and professionals who are tired of guessing. Each episode breaks down the HR, leadership, and structure issues quietly costing you time, money, and peace, so you can build a business that works. I've spent over 15 years in HR, leadership, and adult education, and one thing I see consistently is this: smart, capable people blaming themselves for problems that are structural. So today we're starting with the foundation, why your business feels harder than it should. The problem people think they have. So most people come to me saying things like, I just need to be more consistent. I need to manage my time better. I need to push myself harder. I just need to get motivated again. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. But here's what I've noticed when I look closer. They're already working hard. They're already committed. They're already showing up, yet the business still feels fragile. That's because effort cannot fix what structure was supposed to handle. Let me say it again. Effort cannot fix what structure is supposed to handle. If everything depends on your memory, your energy, your mood, or your availability, the business will always feel heavy. Not because you're failing, but because you were never meant to carry everything yourself. So the real issue is a lack of structure. Webster defines structure as the arrangement of and relations between the parts or elements of something complex. Other definitions are something arranged in a definite pattern of organization, the way something is built or put together, or an underlying framework. When I say structure, I don't mean the corporate red tape or complicated systems. I mean basic order, things like clear roles, even if it's just you right now, defined processes instead of mental notes, boundaries between work and life, clear decision-making authority, and policies and not preferences. Without these, the business stays in survival mode. In survival mode, it feels urgent, loud, and exhausting. So here's what happens when structure is missing. You're constantly reacting. You're solving the same problems over and over. You're second guessing decisions that you've already made. You're doing everything yourself because it feels faster, and you're carrying responsibility without clarity. And that's not leadership, that's overload. And no amount of motivation fixes overload. From an HR perspective, this is what I see. People start businesses without defining how the business will operate. There's passion, there's vision, there's talent, but no operating framework. So instead of building a business, they build a job that they can't step away from. They don't document anything. They don't define expectations. They don't clarify roles. They don't set boundaries. And then they're shocked when they feel burned out, resentful, or stuck. Structure isn't restrictive. Structure is actually protective. It protects your time. It protects your energy. It protects your peace. And yes, it protects your money. So from a coaching lens, I am going to talk about why this affects confidence. And this is where coaching really comes in. When your business lacks structure, you start to internalize the chaos, and it's subtle. It doesn't always show up as stress. Sometimes it shows up as self-doubt. You might catch yourself thinking, Why can't I handle this? Why does this feel so hard? Maybe I'm not cut out for this. And those thoughts don't come from laziness or lack of ambition. They come from lack of clarity. Let me give you an example. I was coaching a client recently, a creative entrepreneur who's wildly talented. I am talking about talented, full of vision, and deeply committed to her faith and family. But every week felt like a scramble. She was juggling client calls, homeschooling her kids, managing her inbox late at night, and trying to launch a new offer. She said to me, I just feel like I'm failing in every direction. I don't even know how to fix it. We looked at her week together and realized it wasn't a motivation issue, it was a structure issue. She had no clear systems for her time. She had no boundaries around her work blocks, and everything felt urgent all the time. Once we mapped out her ideal week, created a simple framework for her client workflow, and put a rhythm in place for her business priorities, everything shifted. And not just logistically, but emotionally. Her words a few weeks later, she said, I feel like I can breathe again. I actually believe I'm capable. That's the coaching moment right there. Confidence doesn't come from hype, it comes from predictability. When you know how things work, you start to trust yourself more. When you know how when you know what comes next, you feel calmer. When decisions aren't based on emotions or exhaustion, leadership starts to feel lighter. So structure doesn't remove flexibility, it removes confusion. It creates space for you to show up with clarity, not just for your business, but for your family and your faith life too. So if you're in a season where your confidence is shaky, don't start with mindset. I want you to start with structure. I want you to take a look at the structure of your business and I want you to do a deep dive. So we're going to do a reflection prompt. I typically don't do this in my podcast, but I just want to because I feel like that this is going to be very beneficial to you. So I want you to take a moment to pause and ask yourself, where in my business am I feeling the most overwhelmed right now? And could that overwhelm be solved with structure instead of more effort? I want you to go ahead, grab a journal or your notes or even an app, and I want you to write it down. What's currently unclear or chaotic? What decisions feel too emotional or draining? And what's one simple system or rhythm you can put in place this week to create more peace? Because one big thing I want you to remember is clarity creates confidence, and God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. So sometimes the breakthrough you need isn't bigger energy, it's better structure. And one thing I know about adult learners, we need order. As an educator, I see this clearly. Adults don't learn well in chaos. I will repeat that. Adults don't learn well in chaos. They learn best when expectations are clear, outcomes are defined, and there's a logical flow. And your business is no different. If you don't know what success looks like, what decisions belong to you, what tasks can be delegated, what actually matters this quarter, then everything feels urgent. And when everything is urgent, nothing is strategic. So if you are a business owner and you don't set quarterly goals for your business, or if you don't know what the quarter block is, then I want you to research that. So typically, if you operate on a calendar year with your business, there's 4 quarters. Quarter one is January, February, March. Quarter two, April, May, June. Quarter three, July, August, September. Quarter four, October, November, December. However, if you're like the federal government and if you operate off the fiscal year, then your quarter one will be October, November, December. Your quarter two would be January, February, March. Quarter three, April, May, June. Quarter four would be July, August, September. And so, as a business owner, when you create your goals, short term and long term, you should definitely break them up by the quarter. And so that way you will be able to identify what's a priority, what's not a priority, and you'll be able to identify those things that can wait later. And so that will really help you determine your priorities because everything is not a priority and everything is not a sense of urgency. And so that is going to be very important. So here's the reframe I want you to take with you. Your business does not feel hard because you're failing. It feels hard because it lacks order, and order can be created. So this isn't about doing more, it's about fixing what's missing. And once structure is in place, effort will work. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, yes, this sounds like my business, this is what I address in my business and HR clarity audit. It's a 90-minute working session where we identify what's broken, why it's broken, and what needs to happen next. So it's not a theory, it's not motivation, it's clear direction. So if your business feels heavier than it should, then this is the place for you to start. You can click the link in the description of this episode to get more information.
This episode is brought to you by the Business and HR Clarity Audit, a strategic one-on-one session designed for entrepreneurs who are growing with intention. If you're a purpose-driven business owner juggling leadership, team dynamics, and sustainable growth, but something just feels off, the Clarity Audit is your next right step. In this personalized audit, you'll uncover what's working, what's holding you back, and how to align your operations, team, and leadership strategy for long-term success. It's not just about checking boxes. It's about building a business that supports your vision and your values. Walk away with a clear, customized roadmap to move forward with confidence. To book, visit brooksdeming.com.
And so I want you to also tune in because in the next episode, we're going to talk about why being busy is not the same as being profitable, and how activity can distract you from what actually moves the business forward. So many people think because they're booked and busy that they're profitable, but are you getting a return of investment? Let me give you a quick example to bring this home. Let's say you are a coach and you typically charge $125 an hour for your services. Now imagine you're hosting a live event, maybe a workshop or a group session, and it's scheduled to run for 4 hours. You price the event at $100 per ticket. Now here's where it gets interesting. Preparing for the event, it takes you 10 hours. You're building the content, setting up logistics, maybe designing the slide deck or creating follow-up materials. So let's do the math. 10 hours of your prep time times $125 an hour equals $1,250 worth of your time. Then you spend another 4 hours delivering the event. So now you're at 14 hours total. But if you're only charging $100 per ticket and maybe 10 people sign up, that's $1,000 in revenue. So now you have spent over $1,700 worth of your time because that's 14 hours times $125 an hour, but you only brought in $1,000. That's a loss, not a return. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying don't do events. I'm not saying everything has to have a 10-time return, but I am saying you have to know your numbers. You have to be honest about the trade-offs because time is your most valuable resource, especially when you're balancing faith, family, and business. If you're pouring out 60 hours during your booked and busy season, but your return of investment doesn't even match your hourly rate, then we have to pause and ask, is this truly sustainable? Is this truly wise? And here's the kicker. Feeling overwhelmed, burned out, or even resentful, that often comes not from the work itself, but from the imbalance between what you're giving and what you're receiving. That's why stewardship matters. God calls us to steward not just our money, but our time, energy, and capacity. So when you're overextended in the name of being productive, but you're not being profitable, whether that's emotionally, spiritually, or financially, it's time to realign. So the real question is the way you're spending your time actually supporting your business and your life, or is it draining you? Before we wrap up this episode, I want to slow this down just a bit and go deeper. because this is where real learning happens. And for those of you that are listening for professional development, I want you to understand what I'm talking about today. It's not just a mindset or business advice. This is operational leadership. This is adult learning and practice. This is stewardship applied to structure. So let's talk about what order looks like in a small business, especially when you are the visionary, the operator, and the decision maker all in one. And when I say order, I'm talking about three specific layers. And if one of those layers are missing, the business will feel unstable. The first layer is role clarity. Even if it's just you right now, you still have roles. You are not just the business owner. You are the service provider. You are the marketer. You are the administrator. You are the financial decision maker. You are the leader. When those roles are blended together with no separation, everything feels urgent because everything feels personal. You respond emotionally instead of strategically, and that can be exhausting. From an HR standpoint, role clarity is foundational. In organizations, confusion doesn't come from lack of talent, it comes from lack of clarity. People don't burn out because they work hard, they burn out because they don't know where their responsibility begins and ends. And the same is true in your business. If you don't know when you are operating as the leader versus when you are operating as the worker, you will constantly feel pulled in every direction, and no amount of motivation can fix that. Here's a simple reflection question I want you to think about as a professional. When you sit down to work, do you know what role you're stepping in for that day? Or are you just reacting to whatever shows up first? That distinction alone creates order. The second layer of the structure is decision authority. This is the one people don't talk about enough for me. Decision fatigue is real. And when everything is up for debate every day, leadership becomes draining. If you are redeciding your pricing, your boundaries, your schedule, your availability, or your priorities over and over again, that's not flexibility. That's instability. Healthy organizations remove unnecessary decisions by setting policies, guidelines, and standards, not to control people, but to protect energy. In your business, this looks like deciding things once and documenting them. What days do you work? What hours are client facing versus admin? What types of requests do you say yes to? What type of work are outside of your scope? Things like what's the minimum standard for taking on a project? When those decisions are already made, you stop negotiating with yourself every day. And that is going to be where your peace comes from. From a coaching perspective, this is powerful because confidence grows when trust grows. And you trust yourself more when your decisions are consistent. The third layer of order is rhythm, not hustle, not pressure, rhythm. Rhythm is how work, rest, planning, and execution flow together over time. This is where quarters matter. This is where seasons matter. This is where your faith, family, and capacity have to be considered honestly. Many business owners live in constant execution mode. They are always producing, responding, delivering, but they never step back to assess. In adult learning theory, reflection is what turns experience into learning. Without reflection, you repeat the same cycles without improvement. So if your business never pauses to review what worked, what didn't work, and what needs to change, you will stay busy without getting better. That's why quarterly planning is so important. Not because it's trendy, but because it creates intentional rhythm. Each quarter should answer three simple questions. What am I building right now? What am I maintaining right now? And what can wait? If everything is happening at once, you're not leading, you're reacting. Now I want to talk briefly about why structure feels uncomfortable at first, because this is also important. Structure forces honesty. Structure is going to force you to take an honest look at your business. It reveals where time is going. It reveals what's profitable and what's not. It reveals where you are overextended. It reveals what you've been avoiding. And that can feel confronting. Many people would rather work harder than face the truth that something isn't aligned. But avoidance always costs more in the long run. From my HR lens, I see this all the time in organizations. Leaders delay clarifying roles, addressing inefficiencies, or setting boundaries because it feels uncomfortable. But that delay creates confusion, resentment, and risk. The same thing happens in small businesses. If you don't address order early, the business will demand it later, usually through burnout, financial stress, or strained relationships. So let me ask you another reflective question. Where have you been relying on effort to compensate for lack of structure? And what has that been costing you? Now I want to connect that back to stewardship because this matters. Stewardship is not just about money, it's about responsibility. Being a good steward means you manage what you have been entrusted with wisely. Your time is entrusted to you, your energy is entrusted to you, your gifts are entrusted to you, your business is entrusted to you. If the way you are operating leaves you constantly depleted, overwhelmed, or disconnected from your values, something needs to be reordered. And order is not about perfection, it's about alignment. So here's a takeaway that you can apply this week. I want you to choose one area of your business that feels heavy, just one. And instead of asking, how can I push through this? Ask, what structure is missing here? Is it a boundary? Is it a decision that needs to be made once instead of repeatedly? Is it a system that needs to be documented? Is it a rhythm that needs to be established? You do not need to overhaul everything at once. Order is built one decision at a time. And once order is in place, effort finally starts to work. That's why I want to leave you with this thought. If your business feels fragile, it's not because you are weak, it's because the foundation needs reinforcement, and that is fixable. This is what I do inside my business and HR clarity audit. Not surface level advice, but real assessment. We look at operations, decision making, capacity, and risk. We identify where order is missing or what needs to be put in place so that the business can support your life and not compete with it. So if today's episode gave language to something that you have been feeling but can't quite name it, then that is your signal. You don't need more motivation. You don't need to try harder. You need order. And order is established, everything else becomes lighter. And once order is established, everything else becomes lighter. I want to leave you with a practical lens you can carry forward, especially if you're listening to this as a professional, a leader, or someone responsible for outcomes and not just ideas. One of the biggest misconceptions I see in business is that structure is something you add later, once you've grown. But in reality, structure is what allows growth to happen without collapse. In HR, we never wait until an organization is overwhelmed to think about policies, roles, and expectations because by then the damage is already happening. Turnover has increased, stress has risen, mistakes have multiplied, and trust has eroded. Small businesses are no different. The scale is smaller, but the impact is just as real. So I want you to think about structure not as something extra, but as something essential. Structure is not the opposite of creativity. It is what's given creativity somewhere to land. Let me give you another real world example of something I see often. A business owner tells me, want to hire help, but I don't trust anyone to do it the way that I would. That sounds like a people problem, but it's not. It's a structure problem. There's no documented processes, no clear expectations, no defined outcome. So of course, delegation feels risky. When the business lives in someone else's head instead of on paper, everything is fragile. This is why leadership becomes lonely for so many entrepreneurs, not because they don't want support, but because the business isn't designed to support more than one person. Structure will change that. Another thing structure does, especially for those balancing business, faith, and family, it creates permission to rest. When everything depends on you being available, rest feels irresponsible. But when systems exist, rest becomes a part of the design and not a disruption. From an adult learning standpoint, this matters because sustained performance requires recovery. Adults do not perform well under constant cognitive load. Decisions making quality declines, emotional regulation weakens, and creativity drops. So if you find yourself irritable, foggy, or disengaged, that's not a character flaw. That's often a signal of an overload. Order reduces load. And I want to be clear about something. Order does not mean being rigid. It means being intentional. You can still pivot. You can still adjust. You can still respond to God's leading, but you're doing it from a grounded place and not from exhaustion. So let me leave you with one last reflection. If someone stepped into your business tomorrow, even temporarily, would they understand how things work? Would they know what matters? Would they know what decisions they can make? Would they know what success looks like? If the answer to those questions is no, let me make this as plain so that you're not wondering what the fix is. In most cases, what's missing is not more effort. It's a core operating document. In HR, we would call this a role and operations guide. In a small business, it might look like a simple business operations playbook or leadership overview document. This is not a 50-page manual. It's a living document that answers a few critical questions in one place. For example, the document would clearly outline what the business does and who it serves, what the current priorities are for the quarter, what decisions can be made without escalation, what standards define done or successful, what boundaries exist around time, communication, and scope. If someone stepped in, even for a week, this document would orientate them quickly. They wouldn't need to guess what matters. They wouldn't need to interrupt you constantly for clarity. And you wouldn't feel like everything would fall apart in your absence. From a leadership perspective, this document does something powerful. It moves businesses out of your head and onto paper. That alone reduces stress. From an HR lens, this is how organizations protect continuity. Knowledge is not locked in one person. Expectations are visible, authority is defined, and accountability, it becomes clear. And from a coaching standpoint, this is where confidence grows, because when you can see how your business operates, you stop feeling like you're holding everything together by force. So if you're wondering where to start there. One clear document that explains, this is how the business works. This is what matters right now. And this is how decisions get made. That's structure in its simplest form. So if you take nothing else from this episode, I want you to take this. When your business feels heavy, don't default to self-criticism. Pause and ask what needs order. Because clarity is going to create confidence and order is going to create sustainability. And leadership becomes lighter when structure is doing its job. So thank you for sticking it out with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for investing time in your growth, your leadership, and your development. I'll meet you in the next episode where I will continue the conversation by unpacking why being busy can feel productive when it's quietly pulling you away from what matters. Until then, take care of what you have been entrusted with. You don't need to try harder. You need better order. Again, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening. Please rate this episode and share it with your family and friends. To learn more about your host or to book a coaching session, visit www.brooksdeming.com. Until next time, rise.
Hi, I'm Tiffany of Tiffany Brown Designs. With over 20 years of creative experience across industries, I create and elevate brands one design at a time. through intentional graphic and brand design, polished film and video editing, and creative artistry. Even the music you're hearing right now, that was produced by me. I also create custom tracks for websites, intros and outros, and content. So what are you waiting for? Visit TiffanyCBrownGD.com and let's bring your vision to life.